Hello everyone, I hope you're comfortable and ready to drift into a quiet, slow journey through time, where we explore life as a soldier in the Roman Empire, and much more than that. Before we begin, I find myself curious, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? It's fascinating to imagine people from all corners of the world settling down, perhaps dimming the lights, while we wander together into history. The life of a Roman soldier was unlike anything we experience today, yet there were patterns, rituals, and routines that shaped every single day, and they were not always as glorious as the stories of conquests might suggest. From the moment a recruit joined the legions, everything changed. Their diet, their sleep, the rhythm of their labor, even the way they thought about the passage of time. Imagine waking at the first hint of dawn, the air still heavy with night mist, and the camp slowly stirring to life. Soldiers rose from their simple bedding, often just straw on the ground, feeling the stiffness in their muscles from yesterday's training, yet knowing that today would demand more. The centurions, always watchful, inspected their men with a careful eye, ensuring that tunics were mended, sandals tied correctly, and armor polished enough to catch a glimmer of the sun. Each piece of equipment, from the gladius tucked at the side to the scutum slung over the back, held a purpose, and every soldier learned to carry them as extensions of themselves, almost as if the metal and leather were part of their own skin. Meals were pragmatic rather than indulgent, designed to fuel rather than to delight, and often consisted of simple staples. Pulse, a thick porridge made from wheat or barley, sometimes mixed with a little olive oil, and supplemented by dried fruits, cheeses, and occasionally salted pork or fish, if the supply lines allowed. Drinking water could vary in quality depending on the location of the camp, and wine was often diluted, providing both hydration and a mild sense of warmth in the chest, especially during the colder months. The day stretched forward with exercises that might seem repetitive but were crucial, marching long distances in formation, practicing thrusts and parries with wooden weapons, sometimes until the arms ached and the sun scorched the neck and shoulders. Each maneuver honed reflexes, built muscle memory, and reinforced discipline, yet there was also a rhythm to it, almost meditative if one allowed the mind to follow the steady beat of boots on earth, the clatter of shields in synchronized motion. Soldiers also had moments of rest, although these were brief and often filled with work that might seem trivial today, repairing the fortifications, checking equipment, or tending to the small gardens that supplied fresh vegetables for the legion. Entertainment was minimal but valued. Some soldiers sang old songs, telling stories of heroes and distant battles, while others played simple games of chance or tested their skills in mock duels, laughing at each other's mistakes while secretly calculating every move, every feint, every block. Letters from home were treasures, read over and over until the ink began to fade, carrying the voices of mothers, sisters, and lovers across hundreds of miles, across deserts, rivers, and hills. Yet life was not without tension. Rumors traveled through the camp, whispers of campaigns, of enemies spotted on the horizon, or of political shifts in Rome itself, which might change everything overnight. A soldier's mind had to balance vigilance with the desire for small pleasures, to maintain a sense of humanity while standing ready for violence, sometimes facing death without hesitation. Nights brought their own rituals. Torches were lit along the perimeter, watch rotations began, and some soldiers found solace in quiet reflection, staring at the stars above, thinking of the cities and villages they had left behind, while the occasional owl hooted in the darkness, and the distant sound of water or wind against tents reminded them that the world continued even in the midst of rigid order. Occasionally, a messenger might arrive with news of a distant skirmish, a call for reinforcements, or a supply caravan delayed by weather, reminding everyone that their existence was tied to larger gears that they could neither control nor fully comprehend. Within the tent, conversations ranged from tactical debates to stories of personal triumphs and mistakes, each man trying to assert his experience while learning from others, the soft murmur of voices blending with the creaking of leather and the rustle of canvas, creating a soundscape both monotonous and strangely comforting. The discipline extended beyond the battlefield. Hygiene was a constant concern, as lice, fleas, and infections could spread rapidly in a camp. Bathing was a ritual when possible, using communal baths when near towns, or small rivers and streams in more remote locations. Clothing was often patched and mended with care, as resources could be scarce, and pride in one's appearance, however practical, reflected both personal dignity and loyalty to the legion. Each day, soldiers internalized rules not just of conduct but of survival, forming bonds that could feel stronger than family, yet also fragile, as combat could claim lives without warning, leaving empty bunks and silence where laughter had recently lived. Through all these routines, through long marches under the blistering sun or drizzling rain, through the preparation of weapons, the sharing of meals, and the quiet moments of reflection under the stars, a soldier in the Roman Empire existed in a state of constant readiness, awareness, and adaptation. Their lives were shaped by the ebb and flow of empire, the ambitions of generals, and the rhythms of their own bodies and minds. And yet, despite the hardships, despite the weariness and danger, many found a strange satisfaction in belonging to something larger than themselves, in the certainty of routine, and in the camaraderie of men who faced the same trials, who shared the same small victories and quiet defeats, day after day, year after year, as the empire marched forward, and the world beyond continued its unhurried turn. The sun climbed higher, though its warmth often felt uneven on the skin of soldiers who had marched countless miles over rocky roads, through dusty plains, and along winding rivers that marked the edges of provinces, each day blending into the next, yet subtly changing as seasons shifted, as crops ripened in the fields, and as rumors of distant battles reached the ears of those who had learned to listen not just for orders, but for the faintest hints of danger or opportunity. The Roman soldier, though disciplined, was not immune to boredom, and yet boredom itself could be a teacher, for in moments of stillness, when the hands were idle and the mind wandered, thoughts began to stretch across memories and possibilities, forming connections between strategy and instinct, between past mistakes and future plans, a quiet form of meditation that often went unnoticed by the commanding officers who were too occupied with maps, reports, and the constant adjustments of supply and reinforcement. Some days brought new recruits who joined the camp with wide eyes, uncertain gait, and voices that trembled as they called greetings or answered roll calls, and the older soldiers, those who had survived the harsher trials of training and skirmishes, would observe them with a mix of amusement, sympathy, and, in some cases, impatience, knowing that discipline was forged not in comfort but in repeated effort, in the insistence that each man became a part of a machine far larger than himself, capable of moving with precision and speed when called upon. Training itself could be relentless, for the legions prided themselves on readiness, and drills were repeated not just in the open fields but in mock urban settings, where narrow alleys, wooden barricades, and simulated ambushes tested not only physical skill but the ability to follow commands under stress, to adapt when formations broke down, to recognize the faint signs of enemy strategy even before it became fully apparent. Meals continued to shape the rhythm of life, and while variety was scarce, soldiers learned to appreciate small nuances, the sharp tang of brined vegetables, the aroma of roasting meats that might appear only on special occasions, the sweetness of honey when mixed into coarse bread, or the occasional cheese, a gift from local farmers who saw the legions as both a threat and a protector, depending on the day and the mood of the region. Within the camp, some found solace in crafting, carving small objects from wood, shaping pieces of metal into functional tools or ornaments, or embroidering simple patterns on fabric to remind them of home or loved ones left behind, each creation a quiet assertion of individuality within the collective structure that demanded conformity in most other ways. The camaraderie among soldiers was a delicate balance of humor, rivalry, and mutual dependence, for trust was not merely a virtue but a matter of life and death. Jokes were shared over a meal, sometimes teasing the centurion or recounting exaggerated tales of battles that may or may not have happened, yet beneath the laughter lay an unspoken understanding. Each man relied on his companions for survival, and each action, whether courageous or reckless, reverberated across the group, affecting morale, reputation, and sometimes the very success of a campaign. Sleep, when it came, was never luxurious. Soldiers lay on straw, dampened by evening dew or the occasional rain, bundled in woolen cloaks, listening to the low murmur of their comrades and the distant sounds of wildlife, the occasional bark of a dog, or the faint clatter of patrols moving through the camp. Dreams, when they arrived, were often interrupted by the sudden need to rise for a watch, or by the creeping anxiety of knowing that somewhere beyond the horizon, the world could change in an instant, and readiness was not a choice but a necessity ingrained so deeply that it persisted even in moments of rest. Letters from home, carried by messengers who traversed long distances, were treasured, read and reread in the flickering torchlight, sometimes containing news of births, deaths, or small triumphs that seemed inconsequential yet held immense emotional weight. Soldiers treasured these glimpses of normal life, as if they provided an anchor to humanity while surrounded by the constant presence of metal, earth, and the disciplined march of daily obligations. The environment around the camp shaped every detail. Rivers provided water, forests offered wood, and the surrounding terrain dictated both defense and patrol strategies, forcing men to learn skills beyond mere combat. They observed animal behavior to anticipate weather changes, tracked the movements of local populations to gauge sentiment, and even studied the soil, knowing that food security could hinge on their ability to recognize fertile ground or locate hidden springs. Gossip traveled faster than official reports, and soldiers often speculated about the motives of generals, the whims of emperors, or the secret alliances and rivalries that influenced distant campaigns. These stories, sometimes grounded in fact, sometimes in exaggeration, filled long evenings, sparking debate, laughter, or tension, and added another layer to life that was at once mundane and essential for mental survival. Occasionally, the soldiers would engage in exercises that seemed designed to break the monotony, mock sieges, hunting expeditions, or tests of endurance, requiring them to balance physical exertion with strategic thinking, to manage exhaustion while maintaining alertness, and to work in close coordination with men whose skills, temperament, and reliability could vary widely. In moments of quiet, soldiers reflected on mortality, on the fleeting nature of individual existence against the backdrop of the empire, and on the strange satisfaction found in being part of something enduring, a force that shaped history even as each man's life remained intensely personal, immediate, and full of small, often unnoticed choices. As night fell again, torches and braziers lit the camp in soft, flickering light, shadows dancing across tents and fortifications, while the distant hills glowed faintly with the moon's reflection. Soldiers settled once more into their routines, sharing whispered conversations, performing last checks on weapons and armor, and listening to the sounds of the camp that had become both familiar and reassuring, a rhythm that marked time more reliably than the shifting sun or the changing seasons. Life as a Roman soldier was a tapestry of repetition and variety, of discipline and small indulgences, a continuous cycle that demanded attention, courage, and patience, weaving together every meal, every march, every conversation, and every night spent under the stars into a narrative of survival, identity, and connection that would endure long after the footsteps faded into history. Morning arrived with a quiet persistence, neither rushed nor delayed, as if the world itself understood the rhythm of the legion's life, and soldiers, already accustomed to the gradual brightening of the sky, began to stir with the habitual motions of a body trained over months or years. Boots were laced with practiced efficiency, tunics straightened, and belts adjusted to ensure that weapons rested exactly where they should, a tactile reassurance that would be necessary in moments of sudden action. The scent of damp earth mingled with the faint aroma of cooked grains, sometimes carrying hints of roasted meats or the resin of torches, creating a sensory backdrop that grounded men in the tangible aspects of their existence even while the mind wandered over distant campaigns, possible threats, or memories of home. Orders moved along the camp with an almost musical cadence, shouted from centurion to soldier, repeated, interpreted, and finally enacted with precision, a living demonstration of discipline in motion, where each individual action contributed to the coherence of the whole. Some soldiers carried water to communal pots, others inspected the fortifications, while a few sharpened blades or repaired shields, attending to details that could make the difference between life and death in the coming days. The lessons of previous campaigns were never far from mind: the importance of cohesion in formation, the unpredictability of enemy tactics, and the necessity of maintaining morale even when the surroundings seemed monotonous or oppressive. Meals, always practical, were prepared with care, and soldiers learned to savor small variations: a slightly sweeter loaf of bread, the occasional addition of herbs, or the warming comfort of diluted wine that hinted at normalcy amidst the rigor of military life. Laughter sometimes erupted unexpectedly over an awkward misstep in the drill, a playful insult, or a storytelling flourish that exaggerated the heroics of a skirmish, but it was never unguarded, for the awareness of danger remained, a subtle tension woven into every gesture, every glance, every interaction. Beyond the camp, the terrain demanded attention. Rivers could swell without warning, paths through forests concealed hidden obstacles, and hills offered vantage points both strategic and perilous, requiring soldiers to combine observation with intuition, experience with caution, and personal endurance with collective effort. The care of equipment was almost ritualistic. Leather was oiled, metal polished, and each weapon tested, not merely for function, but for the psychological assurance it provided, a physical manifestation of readiness that allowed the mind to focus on observation, strategy, and adaptability. In quieter moments, soldiers engaged in small, seemingly trivial tasks that revealed much about their ingenuity, crafting makeshift containers, reinforcing tent stakes, or even fashioning simple toys and trinkets, gestures that connected them to normal life and reminded them that creativity and problem-solving were as vital as strength or discipline. Conversations moved seamlessly from tactical considerations to recollections of previous battles, gossip from nearby settlements, and speculative theories about the larger currents of the empire. Some soldiers shared news of distant provinces, discussing political changes, tax edicts, or the movement of trade goods, while others recounted personal ambitions, dreams of rank advancement, or the simple desire for letters that had yet to arrive from home. The interactions were nuanced, a dance between assertion, camaraderie, and cautious observation, for trust, while essential, was not freely given but earned through demonstration of skill, reliability, and often subtle acts of loyalty. Training exercises continued, varied and relentless, simulating scenarios that might never occur, yet preparing the mind and body for anything. Ambush drills in wooded terrain, forced marches carrying heavy packs, and mock battles where timing, positioning, and communication could be tested under conditions that approximated the unpredictability of real warfare. Fatigue became a familiar companion, yet it was managed as a resource, teaching soldiers the art of pacing, the importance of recuperation, and the subtle signals of the body when limits approached, knowledge that could be crucial in moments where hesitation might be fatal. Evening descended gradually, and with it came the rituals of wind down, the careful inspection of armor and weapons, the sharing of small meals, and the quiet reflection on the day's exertions. Some soldiers wrote brief notes, others practiced skills in silence, while many simply observed the sky as stars emerged, a reminder of vastness beyond the walls of the camp, the reach of the empire, and the countless human lives entwined in its continuity. Conversations at night often took on a reflective tone, tempered by fatigue and softened by candlelight or torch glow. Stories of past exploits blended with lessons learned, reinforcing collective knowledge while offering insight into character, temperament, and judgment. Humor persisted but was gentler, softer, as men understood the fragility of life around them and the significance of solidarity, even when exhausted or uncertain. Sleep approached not as a surrender, but as preparation, an acknowledgement of the cycle that sustained them, vigilance, exertion, and then rest, a pattern repeated endlessly yet always subtly shifting in response to weather, terrain, orders, and human dynamics. Within this rhythm, soldiers developed resilience, a blend of physical endurance, mental acuity, and social intelligence that allowed them to navigate not only the demands of warfare but the complexities of daily existence in a constantly moving, expanding, and occasionally perilous empire. They became attuned to minor changes in their environment, the scent of smoke signaling a distant fire, the unusual silence of birds that suggested a predator, or the faint movement of figures on distant hills, training perception as rigorously as muscle or reflex. Nights, though dark and occasionally cold, provided space for contemplation. Soldiers thought about family, lovers, ambitions, regrets, and sometimes simply allowed themselves the rare indulgence of noticing the patterns of clouds, the rustle of leaves, or the soft murmur of distant waters, small sensory anchors amidst the ordered, demanding life of the camp. In these hours, bonds were reinforced through shared vigilance, conversation, and even silence, creating networks of trust that extended beyond immediate necessity, forming a social and emotional scaffolding that supported men in the face of hardship, injury, and loss. In every facet of daily life, from preparation of meals to the practice of drills, from the maintenance of equipment to the observation of surrounding landscapes, Roman soldiers navigated a world of intricate routines, constant awareness, and complex human relationships, a world that demanded adaptability, resilience, and often quiet courage. And yet, within the repetition and structure, there were moments of subtle fascination. A bird landing unexpectedly near the camp, the texture of freshly tilled soil, the sudden flash of sunlight on armor, or the soft laughter of a comrade in a rare moment of levity, all of which reminded men that even in a life defined by duty, the small details of existence could offer glimpses of beauty, amusement, and continuity, the same threads that connected them to the world beyond the empire. Dawn broke slowly over the camp, painting the canvas of tents and fortifications in pale shades of gold and gray, and soldiers stirred once again, their bodies conditioned to rise before the sun fully claimed the sky. The ritual was familiar, sandals tied, belts adjusted, and armor inspected, each piece a small reassurance that preparedness was more than habit, it was survival. The air carried the mingled sense of cooking grains, smoke from distant fires, and the damp earth that seemed to retain the memory of every footstep and hoofbeat from weeks of marching across varied terrain. Soldiers exchanged greetings with quiet nods or brief words, a subtle acknowledgement of shared purpose and the unspoken understanding that each day would be demanding, unpredictable, yet framed by the structures of training, routine, and loyalty to the legion. The centurions moved among their men with measured attention, eyes scanning for imperfections, weaknesses, or lapses in attention, yet their presence also offered guidance, a living reminder that discipline was as much about teaching as it was about enforcement. Meals followed, pragmatic and sustaining, often repetitive but imbued with small variations that were appreciated by those attuned to subtle differences. The slight sweetness of barley mixed with honey, the firmness of bread just baked, or the occasional addition of preserved olives or cheese that brightened the monotony. Water was rationed carefully, sometimes mixed with small amounts of wine to purify and preserve it, a detail that reflected both the resourcefulness and limitations of supply in distant provinces. Training resumed after breakfast, and the pace varied with the needs of the camp. Long marches to build endurance, drills to reinforce formations, and exercises simulating ambushes or urban engagements, each scenario designed to sharpen both mind and body, to cultivate instinct alongside strategy. Mock battles were particularly engaging, demanding coordination, timing, and split-second decisions, and soldiers approached them with a seriousness tempered by occasional bursts of humor as they adjusted to unexpected developments, missteps, or improvisations by comrades. Beyond combat skills, soldiers attended to the small but essential details of camp life, repairing tents, reinforcing wooden fortifications, cleaning armor, and sharpening blades, each task executed with the precision of long practice, yet infused with awareness that failure in these small duties could magnify risk in larger engagements. The human dimension of the Legion revealed itself in these routines. Men formed bonds not only through shared danger but through collaboration in the mundane, the repetition of small gestures that ensured comfort, safety, and efficiency, and that strengthened a network of interdependence vital for both morale and practical survival. Conversations flowed naturally between duties, often beginning with tactical discussion or speculation about the next campaign and gradually shifting to personal stories, gossip, and reflections on distant homes. Soldiers shared hopes, regrets, and dreams, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in laughter, yet always under the constant backdrop of vigilance, for even moments of levity required awareness of surrounding threats and the unpredictable nature of life beyond the fortified camp. Meals in the afternoon could be brief, yet they offered a necessary respite. Pulse thickened with water, occasionally sweetened with honey or accompanied by a small portion of cheese or dried fruit, eaten quickly but with attention to detail, for nourishment was both physical and psychological. Soldiers developed an intimate knowledge of the land around them. which slopes drained rain most efficiently, where wild animals could be observed without risk, and where water sources could be found even when official maps lacked detail. This environmental literacy was not merely practical. It became part of their understanding of strategy, logistics, and survival, blending observation with experience in ways that ensured readiness and adaptability. As the day progressed, minor competitions or exercises emerged spontaneously, running challenges, mock duels, or small contests in marksmanship with slings or javelins, each providing diversion, training, and an opportunity for social bonding. Humor remained subtle but persistent, teasing about clumsiness, exaggerated boasts of past exploits, and playful mimicking of officers' gestures offered relief from monotony while reinforcing the social hierarchy and cohesion within the group. Evenings arrived gradually, with the sky shifting to hues of amber and violet, and soldiers performed final inspections of armor, weapons, and fortifications, preparing not only for the night but for possible movements at dawn. Fires were lit along the perimeter, torches placed strategically, and the soft murmur of men moving, speaking, or working filled the camp, creating a soundscape simultaneously mundane and comforting. In quieter moments, reflection dominated. Men thought of letters they had written, messages awaited from distant family, or past memories of childhood, small villages, and homes left behind. These thoughts, carried in private yet often shared with a trusted comrade, provided emotional sustenance, a counterbalance to the physical rigor and ever-present vigilance required in camp life. Nights offered opportunities for subtle learning, observing the positions of stars for navigation, listening to the sounds of nocturnal animals for clues about predators or weather changes, and practicing small skills in silence, all while remaining alert to the possibility of sudden alerts, distant fires, or patrol reports that could signal imminent action. The balance between attention and rest was delicate. Sleep was necessary, yet fragmented, always framed by the recognition that readiness must persist even in slumber. Bonds within the Legion strengthened in these hours, a quiet camaraderie built through shared experience, silent understanding, and recognition that survival depended not only on individual skill but on the collective vigilance and cooperation of the group. The discipline, rituals, and subtle routines of daily life merged seamlessly with moments of reflection, humor, and quiet observation, forming a tapestry that was both monotonous and rich, demanding yet sustaining, structured yet flexible. Soldiers learned to find patterns, small joys, and subtle insights within repetition, cultivating resilience, awareness, and a nuanced understanding of the world around them, which included both the immediate terrain and the vast social, political, and logistical systems of the Empire. Every day, every march, every meal, every drill contributed to this ongoing education, shaping men not only as warriors but as observers, thinkers, and collaborators, embedding in them skills, habits, and knowledge that extended far beyond the battlefield. Through this intricate rhythm of labor, reflection, and quiet observation, the life of a Roman soldier revealed itself not merely as a sequence of orders and combat, but as a continuous interplay of survival, discipline, social engagement, and subtle pleasures, a world in which every action, no matter how small, resonated with consequences, meaning, and sometimes unexpected satisfaction. The following morning arrived with a gentle chill, the kind that hinted at the lingering traces of night while promising warmth in the hours to come, and soldiers emerged from their tents, stretching stiff limbs and adjusting belts and straps with the automatic precision that comes from repetition and necessity. The camp stirred with soft murmurs and clanking armor, each movement a reminder that readiness was never optional. Yet within these motions lay an almost meditative quality, a rhythm that shaped the body, focused the mind, and reinforced the subtle cohesion of the group. Breakfast was simple yet carefully prepared, porridge thickened with water, sometimes flavored with a pinch of salt or a hint of honey, accompanied by dried fruit or a small piece of cheese, a practical combination designed to provide energy for the demanding hours ahead. Water was rationed carefully, drawn from nearby rivers or wells, and when available, wine diluted with water served both as hydration and as a minor comfort, offering warmth and a fleeting sense of indulgence amidst the austere life of the Legion. After eating, soldiers prepared for the day's exercises, which varied between long marches, formation drills, and mock battles designed to sharpen reflexes, coordination, and the ability to respond swiftly to unexpected threats. Wooden swords and shields were used for training, yet each strike, each maneuver, was executed with care, as if anticipating a real engagement, a constant blending of simulation and potential reality that kept the mind alert and the body conditioned. Within these routines, subtle competitions often emerged spontaneously. Who could march the farthest without fatigue? Who could strike with the most precision? Who could adapt fastest to changes in formation? These contests, though informal, reinforced skill, endurance, and the social bonds that were essential for both morale and operational efficiency. Soldiers also tended to practical matters within the camp, repairing tents, reinforcing barricades, and maintaining weapons. Every detail mattered, as even a small failure in preparation could have disastrous consequences in the event of an attack or sudden deployment. Men developed routines for care of equipment, from oiling leather to polishing metal, creating an almost ritualistic process that combined utility with psychological reassurance, the sense that they were ready, that they had control over at least some aspects of a life defined by uncertainty. Conversation flowed around these tasks, shifting seamlessly from tactical considerations to personal stories, rumors of distant provinces, and speculative gossip about commanders, political changes in Rome, or the fates of other legions. These discussions were rarely idle. They served to reinforce awareness, test judgment, and build the subtle social intelligence necessary for survival in a hierarchical, disciplined, and occasionally perilous environment. The afternoon brought more intensive exercises, forced marches under the sun, carrying heavy packs, and negotiating challenging terrain that mimicked what might be encountered in real campaigns. Soldiers learned to monitor their own endurance, recognize early signs of fatigue, and support one another in ways that were often quiet and unspoken, a social coordination that extended beyond orders or commands. Meals between exercises were brief but necessary, consumed with awareness of the body's needs and the fleeting availability of rest. Soldiers developed an intimate knowledge of food preparation and preservation, recognizing subtle differences in grain quality, the importance of even small portions of protein or fat, and the ways that water, wine, and seasoning could be managed to sustain energy and morale over long campaigns. In moments of rest, soldiers found ways to occupy the mind and hands, carving small objects, mending clothing, writing letters, or simply observing the natural world around them. These activities were not merely diversions. They were critical to maintaining psychological balance, a buffer against the relentless demands of vigilance, exertion, and discipline. Night brought the return to routine rituals, final inspections, perimeter checks, and preparation for sleep, which was often brief and punctuated by the need for watches or the sudden arrival of messengers bearing news, orders, or rumors. Soldiers reflected quietly on their own experiences, the lives of comrades, and the impermanent nature of their existence against the backdrop of a vast empire. Some allowed themselves moments of wonder, observing the stars, listening to distant rivers or wildlife, and contemplating the rhythms of life that persisted beyond the boundaries of the camp. Bonds strengthened in these hours of quiet, reinforced through shared vigilance, conversation, and the subtle understanding that each man's survival depended on the cohesion and reliability of the group. Through repetition, observation, and reflection, soldiers cultivated resilience, adaptability, and awareness. The constant alternation between labor, rest, and study of the environment created a framework in which men could navigate uncertainty, endure hardship, and maintain a degree of agency in a life shaped by both discipline and external forces beyond their control. And yet, within these routines, there were fleeting moments of beauty, subtle joys, and small victories. The perfect strike in a drill, a joke shared under the glow of a torch, the discovery of a patch of edible herbs, or the brief encounter with a wild animal that paused as if acknowledging the intruders in its domain. These instances, though small, reinforced a sense of presence, agency, and connection, reminding soldiers that even within the rigid structures of duty, there existed opportunities for engagement, reflection, and the quiet satisfaction of mastery over one's own body, environment, and actions. Life as a Roman soldier, therefore, was never simple, yet it offered a unique blend of structure, challenge, and subtle rewards, weaving together the physical, social, and psychological dimensions of human experience into a continuous narrative of survival, identity, and adaptation, a story that unfolded day by day, hour by hour, often unnoticed by those outside the camp, yet deeply significant to those who lived it. The interplay of discipline, routine, camaraderie, reflection, and vigilance created a rhythm that shaped not only the skills and endurance of the Legion but also the inner lives of men, forming memories, habits, and understandings that would persist long after individual campaigns ended, long after the boots stopped marching, long after the campfires burned low into the night. The next day unfolded with the familiar, almost hypnotic rhythm of the camp, the sun spilling gold across the tents and fortifications, catching on polished armor and glinting off the edges of gladii that rested within easy reach. Soldiers awoke to the low murmur of the camp, stretching muscles sore from yesterday's drills and adjusting leather straps and belts with practiced precision, their bodies remembering positions and movements like a living map of experience. Breakfast followed quickly, a pragmatic ritual of thick porridge, occasionally enhanced with honey or dried fruit, and water, sometimes diluted wine, a modest comfort that offered both nourishment and a fleeting sense of normalcy amidst the structured rigor of Legion life. Orders moved from centurions to soldiers, relayed in measured cadence, each command shaping the day with invisible threads, weaving together the actions of hundreds of men into a unified, almost musical motion. Drills began immediately, with soldiers marching in formation across the varied terrain surrounding the camp, over rocky outcrops, through shallow streams, and along paths flanked by tall grasses that whispered underfoot. Wooden swords and shields clattered rhythmically, each strike, parry, and thrust executed with both precision and instinct, a rehearsal for the chaos of actual combat, yet requiring a balance of focus and adaptability that sharpened both body and mind. Minor competitions naturally arose, often initiated by subtle challenges or bets among soldiers, testing endurance, speed, accuracy, and creativity in overcoming obstacles. These games reinforced skill, built camaraderie, and occasionally offered moments of levity in a life otherwise dominated by discipline and routine. Between drills, men attended to practical matters, repairing tents torn by wind or rain, reinforcing barricades, checking and oiling weapons, and sharpening blades. Each act, though seemingly small, carried significance. The smallest oversight could result in injury or loss in future engagements. Attention to detail became a form of mindfulness, merging physical labor with psychological preparation, creating a continuous awareness of self, environment, and collective responsibility. Conversations flowed alongside these tasks, often beginning with tactical observations or speculation about the Empire, and drifting into personal stories, jokes, and quiet reflections on distant homes and loved ones. Letters from family, when received, were read and reread, holding immense emotional weight, a lifeline to a life beyond the strictures of the camp. Afternoons often brought more rigorous training, forced marches carrying heavy packs over uneven terrain, mock sieges using makeshift wooden structures, and simulated ambushes that demanded rapid response, coordination, and ingenuity. Soldiers learned to conserve energy, pace themselves, and trust in both instinct and the skill of their comrades, creating an intricate network of interdependence that was as much psychological as it was tactical. Even brief moments of rest were filled with subtle activity, carving small objects, repairing equipment, tending to gardens or animals near the camp, and observing the natural world for cues about weather, predators, or approaching travelers. These practices honed perception, patience, and the ability to interpret subtle signs in an environment that could change suddenly and without warning. As evening approached, the camp settled into a quieter rhythm, with torches lit along the perimeter and watch rotations beginning, while others performed final checks on weapons and armor. Conversations softened, laughter became muted, and soldiers reflected on the day's exertions, planning for the next, or simply observing the subtle movements of nature around them. Sleep came in measured doses, punctuated by the duty of watch and the constant awareness of possible threats, yet it was a crucial component of maintaining both physical health and mental clarity. Nights were not merely a time of rest, they were moments of reflection, bonding, and preparation. Soldiers contemplated mortality, the fleeting nature of individual existence against the vast expanse of the empire and the shared experiences that defined their collective identity. Some engaged in quiet observation, watching stars, listening to distant rivers, or tracking nocturnal wildlife, using these practices both for practical learning and subtle comfort. The social bonds within the Legion deepened in these hours, strengthened by shared vigilance, whispered conversations, and the understanding that survival depended on cohesion, trust, and unspoken mutual support. The routine of life combined with moments of reflection, humor, and quiet observation created a pattern that was simultaneously monotonous and rich, demanding yet sustaining. Soldiers learned to find meaning and subtle joy in repetition, in the mastery of skills, and in the shared experiences that made the harsh reality of military life bearable. Even in the strict discipline, in the long marches, in the drills and chores, there were instances of small beauty, sunlight glinting on armor, a bird landing nearby, a perfectly executed maneuver in a drill, or the brief, unguarded laughter of a comrade. These fleeting moments reinforced presence, agency, and connection, reminding men that life continued beyond the immediate demands of survival, and that subtle pleasures could coexist with duty. The Legion's life was a continuous cycle of preparation, exertion, reflection, and subtle reward, each day adding to the soldier's knowledge, endurance, and understanding of both self and environment. Discipline, routine, observation, camaraderie, and reflection intertwined to form a continuous narrative of resilience, adaptation, and subtle mastery, weaving together the physical, social, and psychological dimensions of existence into a fabric that defined what it meant to be a soldier in the Roman Empire. The repetition of small acts, the careful attention to detail, and the cultivation of skill, awareness, and trust were not mere habits. They were the very essence of life in the legions, forming a rhythm that shaped not only the men themselves but the unfolding of events across the vast territories of Rome, a story told not in grand battles alone, but in every measured step, every polished blade, every shared smile or whispered word under the stars. Morning light crept over the camp once more, stretching across the tents, fortifications, and the soldiers who were already stirring from sleep. The repetition of rising, stretching, and preparing armor, both mundane and essential, shaping bodies into instruments of endurance and precision. The scent of damp earth, mingled with the smoke of morning fires and the aroma of porridge thickened with water, created an atmosphere that was familiar and grounding, a sensory map of the Legion's life that reminded every man of his place within the intricate web of the camp. Soldiers moved with the habitual coordination born of experience, tying sandals, adjusting belts, inspecting gladii and shields, all actions executed with a combination of discipline and the quiet assurance that preparation was a safeguard against the unpredictable nature of both the environment and human conflict. Breakfast was brief but sustaining, consumed with attention and efficiency. Dried fruit, coarse bread, and occasionally honey provided small pleasures, but the act of eating itself became a rhythm, integrated seamlessly into the larger pattern of activity that structured the day. Water was measured carefully, drawn from nearby sources, and sometimes diluted with wine to preserve both flavor and hygiene, a subtle yet important practice in sustaining health and morale over long stretches in remote or hostile regions. Following breakfast, soldiers engaged in a series of drills designed to maintain sharpness, coordination, and adaptability. Marches over varied terrain tested endurance and balance. Formations practiced under changing conditions reinforced cohesion and communication, and mock combat with wooden weapons demanded focus, reflexes, and trust in comrades whose movements and judgments were as crucial as their own. Within these routines, small competitions and informal challenges emerged organically, often encouraged by the centurions who understood the value of motivation and the reinforcement of skill through playful rivalry. Between exercises, attention turned to maintenance of the camp and equipment. Tents were repaired where wind or rain had caused damage, barricades were reinforced with wood and earth, and weapons and armor were cleaned, oiled, and tested, each act combining utility with the subtle reassurance of control and preparedness. Even in the repetition of these tasks, soldiers found a rhythm that was both physical and mental, a way to cultivate presence, focus, and awareness, sharpening not only the body but the mind's capacity to observe, anticipate, and adapt. Conversations flowed naturally alongside labor and drills, shifting seamlessly between tactical speculation, personal anecdotes, and reflections on distant provinces or life beyond the Legion. Letters from home, when received, were treasured. Their contents, though often brief, held emotional resonance that reminded men of continuity, belonging, and the networks of connection that persisted despite distance and time. Afternoons were devoted to extended marches, obstacle navigation, and endurance exercises designed to condition soldiers to face fatigue, adversity, and unpredictability while maintaining coordination and alertness. The environment itself became a teacher. Men learned to read subtle signs of weather change, recognize patterns of animal behavior, and navigate terrain that could be treacherous if approached without attention or skill. Within these lessons lay practical survival knowledge, a blend of instinct, observation, and learned technique that prepared soldiers not just for combat, but for the extended and often uncertain existence of life on campaign. Evening brought a shift from exertion to reflection, restoration, and preparation for the night. Fires were lit along the perimeter, watch rotations established, and men conducted final inspections of weapons, armor, and fortifications. Conversations softened, humor became gentler, and moments of quiet observation, of stars, distant rivers, or nocturnal wildlife, offered both practical knowledge and subtle comfort. Bonds within the Legion were reinforced in these hours, built through shared vigilance, conversation, and the mutual understanding that survival depended on collective cohesion as much as individual skill. Sleep followed in fragmented doses, punctuated by the duty of watch or sudden news that required attention, yet it was a necessary element in maintaining physical health and mental clarity. The rhythm of life, preparation, exertion, observation, reflection, and subtle reward formed a continuous pattern that shaped both the external actions and internal experiences of soldiers. Within this structure, small moments of beauty and satisfaction were discovered: the perfect alignment in a drill, the glint of sunlight on polished metal, a bird landing unexpectedly nearby, or the quiet laughter of a comrade shared beneath the flickering light of a torch. These instances, though fleeting, reinforced a sense of presence, agency, and human connection, creating a balance that allowed men to endure both the monotony and the rigor of military life. Each day contributed to the gradual accumulation of skill, endurance, and subtle mastery, embedding in soldiers an understanding of self, environment, and group dynamics that extended far beyond immediate survival. Through repetition and reflection, through shared labor, humor, and vigilance, the Legion became more than a military unit. It became a living network of observation, coordination, and trust, a social and practical ecosystem that enabled men to navigate the challenges of life in an empire that spanned continents. Every march, every drill, every meal, and every quiet moment under the stars wove together into a continuous tapestry of experience, creating men who were not only disciplined and capable but perceptive, adaptive, and intimately aware of the subtle rhythms of life that governed both the camp and the wider world beyond its walls. In this seamless interplay of labor, reflection, and intermittent delight, soldiers learned not only the craft of war but the endurance of existence, discovering that even within the rigid structures of duty, there existed opportunities for observation, subtle pleasure, and the quiet affirmation of life, resilience, and shared humanity. The morning arrived with a cool clarity, sunlight filtering through the slight mist that hovered over the camp, and soldiers began their day with the familiar motions, tying sandals, adjusting straps, and inspecting gladii and shields with meticulous care, a ritual that had become as natural as breathing. Breakfast was simple yet sustaining: thick porridge, sometimes sweetened with a touch of honey, pieces of coarse bread, and occasionally small amounts of dried fruit or cheese, each bite both nourishment and a small comfort in a life dominated by structure and vigilance. Water was carefully rationed, sometimes diluted with wine, a habit born of both practicality and the slight indulgence that could lift spirits amidst the monotony of repetitive drills. Once fed, soldiers moved through a series of exercises designed to keep muscles conditioned, minds sharp, and reflexes tuned. Marches through uneven terrain tested balance and stamina, formation drills reinforced cohesion and communication, and mock engagements with wooden swords and shields simulated the unpredictability of battle while teaching adaptability, timing, and trust. Within these exercises, subtle rivalries and challenges arose, often in jest but always with the serious undertone of skill improvement, endurance testing, and camaraderie reinforcement. Beyond physical conditioning, soldiers attended to the minutiae of camp life, repairing tents battered by wind, reinforcing barricades, sharpening blades, oiling leather, and arranging supplies with both efficiency and care. These tasks, though seemingly mundane, carried significance, for each small detail could influence survival and performance in unexpected circumstances. Conversation moved fluidly alongside labor, shifting between tactical analysis, speculation about distant provinces, personal anecdotes, and reflections on family or home. Letters from loved ones, when available, were treasured, their words forming lifelines to the lives and communities soldiers had temporarily left behind. Afternoons often involved longer marches, sometimes simulating campaigns or forced maneuvers to build stamina and resilience, training soldiers to maintain coordination, awareness, and composure despite fatigue. Observation of the environment became second nature, the rustle of leaves hinting at wildlife, distant bird calls signaling changes in weather, or the subtle texture of soil revealing the safest paths. These attentions were practical, enhancing readiness, but also served to deepen the soldier's understanding of the terrain, sharpening the mind in ways beyond physical conditioning. Small moments of recreation punctuated the day, competitions in marksmanship with slings or javelins, informal duels, or playful mimicry of centurions' gestures. Humor remained a subtle but persistent element, relieving tension while reinforcing social cohesion and hierarchy. Evening brought the camp into a quieter rhythm, with fires illuminating the perimeter, watch rotations established, and final inspections of weapons, armor, and fortifications. Men engaged in quiet reflection, considering the day's exertions, planning for tomorrow, or simply observing the natural world, listening to rivers, the soft rustle of nocturnal animals, or the faint whispers of wind through the camp. Sleep was fragmented yet essential, punctuated by duty, vigilance, and the occasional arrival of messengers bearing news, orders, or rumors. In these hours, bonds deepened through shared experience and understanding, reinforcing trust and interdependence crucial for both survival and morale. The repetitive cycle of preparation, exertion, observation, and reflection created a rhythm that shaped not only the soldiers' actions but their internal experiences, instilling resilience, adaptability, and a nuanced understanding of both self and environment. Amid this structured life, subtle pleasures emerged: the perfect execution of a maneuver, sunlight catching on polished armor, the quiet observation of wildlife, or the laughter of a comrade shared in a fleeting, unguarded moment. Such instances, though minor, reinforced presence, agency, and human connection, allowing men to navigate the strictures of military life with a balance of duty and quiet satisfaction. Each day's repetition contributed to a cumulative understanding of survival, social dynamics, and personal endurance. Soldiers learned to interpret environmental cues, anticipate challenges, and collaborate seamlessly with comrades, blending discipline, observation, and intuition into an almost instinctual framework of action. Beyond mere training, these practices shaped character, perception, and the subtle art of leadership and followership, cultivating awareness of human behavior, strategy, and the often unpredictable nature of both allies and adversaries. Life in the Legion was a continuous negotiation between rigor and adaptability, repetition and discovery, labor and subtle pleasure. Discipline and routine intertwined with moments of observation, reflection, humor, and small victories, forming a fabric of existence that was as complex as it was constrained. The day-to-day activities, marching, drilling, maintaining equipment, observing the environment, sharing stories, and preparing for the next challenge, were interwoven into a larger narrative of resilience, skill, and subtle mastery. Soldiers existed within a rhythm that was at once monotonous and rich, demanding and sustaining, structured yet flexible, a continuous interplay between external action and internal reflection, between immediate necessity and long-term adaptation. Each action, no matter how small, carried weight. A polished blade, a repaired tent, a shared story, or a quiet observation became part of a cumulative intelligence that shaped both the individual and the legion as a whole. In this seamless interweaving of duty, reflection, and subtle delight, soldiers discovered that life, even under the rigid structures of the Roman military, offered opportunities for engagement, insight, and the quiet affirmation of presence, agency, and shared humanity. The legion, in its combination of rigorous discipline, social cohesion, environmental awareness, and the occasional fleeting moment of pleasure, became more than a military unit. It became a living ecosystem of observation, coordination, trust, and subtle mastery, capable of sustaining men in a life defined simultaneously by monotony, rigor, and the unending demands of survival. The dawn of another day arrived softly, the sun casting long shadows across the camp as soldiers began to stir, the familiar sounds of straps, sandals, and armor filling the morning air, a subtle symphony of preparation that had become almost second nature. Porridge, bread, and occasional dried fruit formed the morning meal, consumed quickly yet with a quiet attentiveness, for every calorie mattered, every measure of energy preserved for the tasks ahead. Water, carefully drawn and sometimes mixed with wine, refreshed and sustained the men, its rationed presence a constant reminder of the balance between need and resourcefulness. Once fed, the legion moved with fluid efficiency into the day's exercises. Marches over uneven terrain tested balance and endurance, while formation drills demanded attention to timing, spacing, and silent communication, each step and motion contributing to the cohesion that was vital to survival and effectiveness in potential engagements. Wooden swords and shields clattered in rhythm as mock combat unfolded, simulating the chaos of battle while teaching focus, agility, and trust in comrades, the lessons extending beyond the physical into a deep awareness of timing, perception, and consequence. Beyond formal drills, soldiers engaged in smaller tasks that ensured both readiness and comfort, repairing tents torn by wind, reinforcing barricades, oiling leather, and sharpening weapons, actions performed with care, precision, and a quiet mindfulness that transformed routine labor into both training and subtle meditation. Conversation ebbed and flowed around these tasks, beginning with tactical speculation or logistical planning and often shifting into personal narratives, rumors, or reflections on distant homes. Letters received were held in careful reverence, read and reread, connecting men to the lives they had momentarily left behind and offering a quiet emotional anchor in the otherwise structured world of camp life. Afternoon exercises were longer and more taxing, often combining forced marches with obstacle negotiation, simulations of ambushes, and extended formation practice. Soldiers were trained not only to endure fatigue but to maintain situational awareness, coordinate with comrades, and anticipate the unpredictable, cultivating both mental acuity and physical resilience. Observation of the environment became second nature, the subtle rustle of leaves indicating animal movement, the texture of soil revealing hidden dangers, or distant sounds signaling changes in weather or the approach of others. Such awareness was essential for both immediate survival and strategic advantage, embedding the practice of observation into the rhythm of daily existence. Informal contests and playful rivalries punctuated the day, from javelin accuracy to speed in completing marches or drills, blending humor with skill building and reinforcing social bonds within the legion. These moments of levity, though brief, served as necessary respite, a psychological counterbalance to the constant demands of discipline, vigilance, and physical exertion. As evening approached, the camp transitioned into a quieter rhythm. Fires were lit along the perimeter, watch rotations established, and soldiers performed final inspections of weapons, armor, and fortifications, ensuring preparedness for the night and any sudden developments. Conversations softened, humor became subdued, and men often turned inward, reflecting on the day's efforts, anticipating challenges ahead, or observing the subtle movements of nature, the flicker of torchlight on leaves, the distant glimmer of water, the whisper of wind through the camp. Sleep followed in fragmented intervals, punctuated by watch duties and occasional alerts, yet it remained a crucial element of endurance, providing both physical recovery and mental clarity. Within this structured cycle, soldiers discovered a rhythm that shaped both their external actions and internal experiences. Each repetition of drill, march, repair, and observation contributed to cumulative skill, awareness, and resilience, cultivating not only competence but also confidence, perception, and adaptability. Even in the repetition of seemingly mundane tasks, moments of beauty and subtle satisfaction emerged. The alignment of a shield in formation, sunlight glinting on polished metal, the unexpected call of a bird, or the quiet laughter shared with a comrade during a fleeting break. These instances reinforced presence, awareness, and connection, reminding men that even within strict routines, life offered subtle rewards and fleeting pleasures. Through this continuous interplay of labor, reflection, observation, and intermittent delight, soldiers internalized lessons not merely of survival but of perception, judgment, and cooperation, understanding the delicate balance between individual initiative and collective cohesion. Life in the Legion was an ongoing negotiation between discipline and adaptability, monotony and discovery, exertion and reflection, creating an immersive experience in which every act, no matter how small, contributed to a larger pattern of existence, resilience, and subtle mastery. The Legion, with its combination of rigorous structure, social cohesion, environmental awareness, and quiet moments of joy, functioned as more than a military unit. It was a living system, teaching men endurance, skill, and the delicate art of navigating both human and natural complexities. Each day, with its marches, drills, maintenance, observation, and reflection, formed an unbroken narrative, a flowing tapestry of experience that embedded knowledge, resilience, and awareness into the very fabric of the soldiers' lives, shaping both their abilities and their understanding of the world, one step, one action, and one quiet observation at a time. The morning sun rose gradually over the camp, spilling golden light across tents, fortifications, and the men already stirring, the habitual sounds of straps, sandals, and the occasional metallic clink of armor creating a familiar rhythm that marked the start of another day. Breakfast was simple yet sustaining: thick porridge, coarse bread, and occasional additions of dried fruit or cheese, each bite functional yet comforting, fueling bodies conditioned by repeated exertion and constant attention. Water was carefully drawn, sometimes mixed with wine, a habit born of both hygiene and slight indulgence, a reminder that even within strict routines, minor pleasures could sustain morale. Soldiers moved through morning drills with fluid precision, a choreography honed by months or years of practice, marching across uneven terrain, forming tight formations, and engaging in mock combat that simulated the chaos of real battle while teaching timing, coordination, and trust in comrades. Wooden swords and shields clattered in unison, creating a percussive echo across the camp that was both mesmerizing and practical, reinforcing the shared discipline and rhythm of the Legion. Tasks beyond combat training occupied attention as well. Tents were repaired where wind or rain had taken their toll, barricades reinforced, weapons cleaned and sharpened, leather oiled, and supplies arranged efficiently. Every action, though seemingly minor, carried weight, a single misstep potentially impacting readiness and survival, so attention and care were paramount. Conversations flowed naturally alongside labor, moving from tactical speculation and gossip to personal anecdotes and reflections on distant homes or family, a reminder that even amidst rigorous discipline, human connections persisted. Letters from loved ones were cherished, their words offering emotional sustenance and a fleeting connection to lives paused rather than abandoned. Afternoon exercises pushed endurance further, extended marches, obstacle navigation, and drills simulating ambushes or sieges, all designed to cultivate physical resilience, strategic awareness, and mental acuity. Soldiers learned to read the environment with precision, observing subtle shifts in terrain, animal behavior, and weather cues, understanding that awareness could mean the difference between safety and danger, success and failure. Informal contests, challenges, and playful rivalries surfaced, injecting humor into the disciplined routine, fostering camaraderie, and reinforcing both skill and morale. Even in fleeting moments of levity, the lessons of attention, balance, and coordination were subtly reinforced. Evening brought a shift in pace as the camp settled into quieter rhythms. Fires were lit along the perimeter, watch rotations organized, and final inspections ensured weapons, armor, and fortifications were prepared for night or sudden mobilization. Soldiers reflected on the day's exertions, mentally rehearsed strategies, or observed the surrounding environment, listening to rivers, nocturnal animals, or the whisper of wind through tents and trees. Sleep arrived in fragments, punctuated by the duty of watch and occasional alerts, yet it was essential, offering both physical recovery and mental clarity. Through this repetition, soldiers cultivated resilience, discipline, and subtle mastery of both body and mind. Each day's labor, observation, and reflection built a foundation of endurance, awareness, and interdependence that was critical to survival in an unpredictable world. Within this framework, moments of beauty and satisfaction emerged. A perfectly executed drill, sunlight glinting off polished armor, a bird landing nearby, or the brief, unguarded laughter of a comrade. These fleeting pleasures reinforced presence, agency, and connection, reminding men that even under strict discipline, subtle joys and human interactions remained vital. The interplay of routine, reflection, and minor delights shaped not only actions but the inner experience of soldiers, embedding lessons in observation, coordination, and adaptability. Life in the Legion was a negotiation between rigorous structure and subtle freedom, between monotony and discovery, between exertion and quiet satisfaction. Soldiers internalized these rhythms, learning to anticipate challenges, respond effectively to unexpected events, and navigate both social and environmental complexities with skill and awareness. The Legion was more than a military force. It was a living system that combined discipline, skill, social cohesion, and environmental attunement, producing men capable of endurance, observation, and subtle mastery over circumstances both immediate and distant. Every drill, march, repair, conversation, and quiet observation contributed to a continuous, flowing narrative of survival, growth, and adaptation. Within these patterns, men discovered resilience, agency, and a profound understanding of both self and collective, realizing that even within the strict routines of Roman military life, there existed space for reflection, connection, and fleeting moments of beauty and satisfaction. Day by day, hour by hour, soldiers became not only warriors but observers, strategists, and participants in a living story that extended far beyond the immediate demands of camp life, a narrative shaped by vigilance, routine, camaraderie, and the subtle interplay between discipline and the quiet pleasures hidden within the folds of everyday existence. The morning emerged quietly over the Legion's camp, the first rays of sunlight glinting on polished metal, illuminating tents and soldiers who were already stirring, stretching stiff limbs and adjusting belts and straps with the ease that comes from habit and necessity. The air was filled with the familiar scent of earth, smoke from morning fires, and the slightly sweet aroma of porridge thickened with water, a smell that signaled both sustenance and routine, grounding men in the rhythm of their daily existence. Breakfast was consumed quickly yet mindfully. Thick porridge, pieces of coarse bread, and occasional dried fruit or cheese provided nourishment, while water, sometimes mixed with wine, offered refreshment and a subtle sense of comfort. Soldiers then moved through morning drills with precise coordination, marching over uneven terrain, forming tight, disciplined formations, and engaging in mock combat with wooden swords and shields. Each movement, each strike and parry, reinforced both physical skill and the delicate social dance of trust and anticipation among comrades, a silent understanding that survival depended as much on coordination and awareness as on individual strength. Tasks beyond combat training filled the spaces between drills. Tents required constant maintenance, barricades were reinforced, weapons sharpened, and leather oiled. Every small act contributed to the overall readiness of the Legion and cultivated mindfulness, attention to detail, and subtle mastery of equipment that might otherwise be taken for granted. Conversations meandered alongside labor, shifting seamlessly between tactical discussion, gossip, reflections on distant provinces, and stories from home. Letters, when received, became treasured tokens, connecting men emotionally to lives they had left behind, a thread of continuity that persisted despite distance and the regimented demands of military life. Afternoon exercises were longer, more taxing, combining forced marches, obstacle navigation, and simulated ambushes or sieges designed to sharpen both endurance and strategic awareness. Soldiers learned to interpret the environment with precision, listening to subtle changes in the wind, observing animal behavior, and noting variations in terrain. Each cue informed action, influencing decisions, movement, and anticipation, blending instinct, observation, and training into a seamless flow of perception and response. Informal contests and friendly challenges arose naturally, whether testing accuracy with javelins or slings, timing during drills, or endurance in marches. These moments of levity reinforced skill, fostered camaraderie, and offered a psychological counterbalance to the rigid demands of discipline, creating bonds that extended beyond the immediate pressures of duty. As evening approached, the camp transitioned into a quieter rhythm. Fires were lit along the perimeter, watch rotations established, and soldiers performed final inspections of weapons, armor, and fortifications. Conversation softened, humor became subdued, and men reflected on the day's exertions, anticipating challenges ahead, or simply observing the natural world around them. The subtle rustle of leaves, the distant flow of rivers, or the quiet calls of nocturnal animals. Sleep followed in fragmented intervals, punctuated by the duty of watch and occasional unexpected developments, yet it was vital, offering both physical restoration and mental clarity. Within this cycle, soldiers cultivated resilience, discipline, and awareness, integrating repeated action with observation, reflection, and social connection. Small pleasures and moments of satisfaction emerged amidst routine. The perfect execution of a maneuver, sunlight glinting on polished metal, the brief, unguarded laughter of a comrade, or the quiet observation of wildlife. These experiences reinforced presence, agency, and connection, reminding men that life contains subtle joys even within strict structures. The repetition of daily labor, observation, and reflection contributed to cumulative learning and skill, sharpening perception, judgment, and adaptability. Soldiers internalized lessons not just of combat or survival, but of social dynamics, environmental awareness, and the delicate balance between individual initiative and collective cohesion. Life in the Legion was a continuous negotiation between discipline and adaptability, monotony and discovery, exertion and reflection. Each action, no matter how small, played a role in shaping resilience, competence, and understanding, creating a tapestry of experience that defined what it meant to live, endure, and adapt as a soldier in the Roman Empire. Beyond the immediate demands of physical exertion, drills, and labor, there existed a subtle interplay of observation, reflection, humor, and fleeting pleasure, weaving together into an ongoing narrative of survival, skill, and human connection. The Legion functioned as more than a military unit. It was a living ecosystem, a complex network of trust, coordination, perception, and shared experience, capable of sustaining men in both the rigors of combat and the quieter demands of everyday life. Each day, with its marches, drills, repairs, observation, and reflective moments, contributed to a continuous story of adaptation, endurance, and subtle mastery, embedding knowledge, skill, and resilience into the very fabric of the soldiers' lives. One measured step, one precise strike, and one quiet observation at a time. The camp awoke gradually, sunlight spilling over tents and fortifications, glinting off the polished surfaces of gladii and larica segmenata, and soldiers began their morning with familiar motions, stretching stiff limbs, adjusting straps, and checking the fit of armor with practiced care. The smell of earth, mingled with smoke from small fires and the subtle aroma of thick porridge, created an atmosphere both grounding and familiar, signaling the start of another day in a life dictated by rhythm, precision, and duty. Breakfast was functional yet comforting, porridge thickened with water, pieces of coarse bread, and occasional dried fruit or cheese provided sustenance, while water, sometimes diluted with wine, refreshed both body and spirit, a minor indulgence that reinforced morale and focus. Soldiers quickly moved into morning drills, the sounds of marching, shields clashing, and coordinated commands filling the air. Movement was precise, fluid, and demanding. Long marches across uneven terrain tested stamina and balance. Formation drills reinforced cohesion, silent communication, and discipline, and mock engagements with wooden weapons simulated the unpredictability of real combat, training both body and mind to respond instinctively yet strategically. In between drills, soldiers performed critical tasks that ensured readiness and comfort. Tents were mended, barricades strengthened, weapons sharpened, and leather oiled. Each minor act, though repetitive, was layered with significance, an investment in survival and operational efficiency. Conversation, flowing alongside these tasks, shifted seamlessly from tactical speculation to personal anecdotes, rumors about distant provinces, and memories of home. Letters, when received, were read and reread, providing a fragile yet vital connection to family and familiar life, a tether that reminded soldiers of the world beyond the regimented demands of camp existence. Afternoons were dedicated to longer, more exhaustive exercises, extended marches, obstacle navigation, and complex simulations of ambushes, sieges, and rapid tactical maneuvers. Soldiers honed their ability to read environmental cues, subtle changes in wind, distant animal movements, variations in terrain, all critical for survival and strategic advantage. Informal competitions and playful challenges often emerged naturally, testing accuracy, speed, and endurance, while fostering camaraderie, subtle leadership skills, and a shared sense of identity within the Legion. As daylight faded, the camp transitioned into a quieter rhythm, torches illuminating pathways, watch rotations organized, and final inspections of weapons, armor, and fortifications conducted with meticulous care. Soldiers engaged in reflection, sometimes silently observing the natural world around them, the rustle of leaves, the flowing of nearby rivers, or the distant call of nocturnal creatures, sometimes sharing quiet conversations, stories, or laughter, reinforcing social bonds and shared understanding. Sleep came in interrupted cycles, punctuated by duties, vigilance, and occasional alerts, yet it remained essential for physical recovery, mental clarity, and readiness for the unpredictable demands of military life. Within this cycle, soldiers discovered a subtle balance between repetition and discovery, discipline and adaptability, labor and reflection. Moments of beauty and satisfaction punctuated the day. The alignment of a shield in formation, the gleam of sunlight on polished armor, the call of a bird, or a fleeting, unguarded laugh shared among comrades. These instances reinforced presence, awareness, and the subtle pleasures that human connection and attentive observation could provide. The cumulative effect of daily exertions, observation, and reflection produced not only physical and tactical skill but also psychological resilience, perceptiveness, and nuanced understanding of human behavior and environmental cues. Life in the Legion was simultaneously structured and fluid, demanding yet sustaining, monotonous yet rich with subtle complexity. Soldiers learned to anticipate challenges, respond effectively to changing circumstances, and navigate both social and environmental dynamics with skill, awareness, and an evolving sense of judgment. The Legion functioned as a living system, a complex network of coordination, trust, observation, and shared experience, producing men capable of endurance, subtle mastery, and adaptation. Each day's routine, with its measured sequence of marching, drilling, labor, observation, and reflection, contributed to an ongoing narrative of resilience, skill, and the quiet art of survival. In this continuous flow, men discovered that even within the strictures of military life, moments of insight, connection, and subtle pleasure were woven seamlessly into the fabric of existence. The repetition of small tasks, the maintenance of equipment, the shared laughter, and the attentive observation of both human and natural rhythms created an immersive, flowing experience in which each day, hour, and action added to the story of what it meant to live, endure, and adapt as a soldier in the Roman Empire. A life defined as much by the unseen lessons of observation and reflection as by the tangible achievements of discipline and skill. The morning light crept again over the camp, brushing the tents with pale gold, and soldiers stirred with the practiced motions of men who had long since embedded routine into muscle memory, sandals tied, straps adjusted, armor checked, gladii polished until they caught the sunlight just right, a small but meaningful ritual of readiness. The air smelled of damp earth, smoke from morning fires, and the slightly sweet aroma of thick porridge, a scent that both nourished and reminded men of the rhythm of their existence. Breakfast was efficient yet satisfying. Coarse bread, porridge, occasional dried fruit or cheese, each morsel sustaining bodies conditioned by relentless physical activity. Water was rationed carefully, sometimes blended with wine, a small indulgence that brought comfort and aided morale. Soldiers moved into drills with precision, the cadenced sound of boots on soil, shields colliding, and gladii tapping forming a rhythm that was both hypnotic and functional. Marching over uneven terrain tested balance and stamina, formation drills reinforced cohesion and silent communication, and mock combat with wooden weapons cultivated reflexes, timing, and mutual trust. Each motion had purpose, blending discipline, observation, and anticipation into a seamless pattern that shaped both body and mind. Between drills, men attended to tasks that maintained camp readiness and personal equipment. Tents repaired from wind or rain damage, barricades reinforced, weapons sharpened, and leather oiled. These laborious acts, though repetitive, carried significance far beyond mere routine. They instilled attention, patience, and a subtle mastery that could mean the difference between order and chaos, survival and failure. Conversation flowed naturally alongside labor. Soldiers exchanged tactical observations, stories from distant provinces, rumors that traveled along the ranks, and reflections on families left behind. Letters, when they arrived, were held in reverent hands, offering fleeting connection to home and a fragile reminder of life beyond the regimented demands of the Legion. Afternoon exercises stretched endurance further, combining long marches, obstacle navigation, and complex simulations of ambushes, sieges, and strategic maneuvers. Soldiers developed an instinct for observation. Subtle changes in terrain, the flight of birds, or the rustle of leaves could reveal hidden threats or advantageous positions. Awareness became second nature, a constant undercurrent guiding movement, thought, and judgment. Informal competitions and challenges arose naturally, from javelin accuracy to speed during drills or coordination in maneuvers. These moments of levity reinforced skill, forged bonds, and offered relief from the unyielding demands of discipline, blending camaraderie and training in a way that strengthened the social fabric of the Legion. Evening brought a quieter rhythm to the camp. Fires were lit along the perimeter, watch rotations established, and final inspections of weapons, armor, and fortifications ensured readiness for the night. Soldiers reflected on the day's exertions, observed the surrounding environment, the glimmer of water in a distant stream, the rustle of nocturnal animals, or the whispering wind, and shared quiet conversations, stories, or laughter that strengthened trust and connection among comrades. Sleep arrived in fragmented intervals, interrupted by duty or alerts, yet it remained essential, offering restoration, clarity, and preparedness for the unpredictable challenges of life on campaign. In this cycle, soldiers discovered subtle pleasures and moments of satisfaction. The perfect alignment in a formation, sunlight reflecting off polished armor, the call of a bird, or an unguarded laugh shared with a comrade. These small joys reinforced awareness, presence, and connection, balancing the rigor of discipline with human experience. Daily repetition of labor, observation, and reflection contributed to cumulative skill, resilience, and insight, shaping judgment, perception, and adaptability. Soldiers internalized lessons of survival, social interaction, and environmental awareness, blending individual initiative with collective cohesion. Life in the Legion was a continuous negotiation between strict structure and adaptive flexibility, between monotony and discovery, exertion and reflection. The Legion was more than a military unit. It was a living network of coordination, observation, trust, and shared experience, sustaining men in both combat and the quieter demands of daily life. Every drill, march, repair, and reflective observation added to the narrative of survival, mastery, and subtle growth, weaving together a tapestry of existence in which skill, discipline, connection, and fleeting pleasure were inseparable threads, forming a story of what it truly meant to endure, adapt, and live as a Roman soldier, day by day, step by step, breath by breath. The camp awoke once more, the sunlight spreading slowly across tents and fortifications, glinting on gladii, larica segmentata, and polished helmets, signaling the start of another day in a life measured by routine, vigilance, and endurance. Soldiers moved with precision, stretching stiff limbs, adjusting straps, and checking armor as if each movement were part of a ritual, a necessary choreography that had become second nature. The smell of morning fires mingled with damp earth and the faint aroma of porridge, a sensory cue that signaled sustenance, preparation, and the rhythm of daily life. Breakfast was simple yet essential: porridge, coarse bread, occasional dried fruit or cheese, and water, sometimes mixed with wine to aid both hygiene and morale. Each bite, each sip, was consumed with quiet attentiveness, fueling bodies hardened by drills, marches, and constant attention to both detail and duty. Soldiers moved into morning exercises with coordinated precision, the cadence of boots striking soil, shields clashing, and gladii tapping forming a rhythmic soundscape that reinforced discipline, focus, and cohesion. Long marches over uneven terrain tested endurance, balance, and coordination. Formation drills cultivated silent communication and anticipation, and mock combat with wooden weapons sharpened reflexes, timing, and trust in comrades. Every action contributed to a continuous flow of skill, observation, and adaptation, blending physical exertion with mental acuity. Between drills, attention turned to the maintenance of the camp and personal equipment. Tents were repaired, barricades reinforced, weapons sharpened, and leather oiled, each task both practical and subtly meditative, training attention to detail, patience, and a sense of control over circumstances that could otherwise feel chaotic. Conversation wove seamlessly through these tasks, shifting from tactical reflection to storytelling, rumors from distant provinces, and memories of home. Letters, when available, were cherished, offering emotional sustenance and a connection to lives temporarily suspended beyond the regimented confines of the Legion. Afternoons were filled with extended, more challenging exercises, longer marches, obstacle navigation, and complex tactical simulations that tested both physical stamina and mental adaptability. Soldiers honed an instinct for observation. The rustle of leaves, the flight of birds, subtle shifts in terrain, and distant sounds all informed judgment and decision-making, shaping a continuous awareness of the environment. Informal competitions arose naturally, testing accuracy with javelins, timing during drills, and coordination in maneuvers, blending training with playful rivalry, camaraderie, and reinforcement of skill. As the day waned, the camp transitioned into a quieter rhythm. Fires lined the perimeter, watch rotations organized, and final inspections of weapons, armor, and fortifications ensured readiness for night. Soldiers reflected on the day's exertions, observed nature around them, the glimmer of a distant stream, the subtle movement of nocturnal animals, the whisper of wind through trees, and shared quiet conversations, jokes, or stories, reinforcing bonds and trust. Sleep arrived in interrupted intervals, yet it was essential, providing physical recovery, mental clarity, and readiness for the unpredictable challenges of the following day. Within this daily cycle, moments of subtle pleasure and satisfaction emerged. The alignment of shields in formation, sunlight glinting off polished armor, a bird landing nearby, or a fleeting, unguarded laugh with a comrade. These instances reinforced awareness, presence, and the human connections that persisted even under strict discipline. The cumulative effect of repeated drills, observation, and reflection cultivated skill, resilience, and nuanced perception, embedding lessons in both survival and social dynamics. Soldiers learned to anticipate challenges, respond with precision, and navigate the complexities of both human and environmental factors, blending individual initiative with collective cohesion. Life in the Legion was a balance between structured routine and subtle discovery, between monotony and insight, between exertion and reflection. The Legion itself was more than a fighting force. It was a living system of coordination, trust, observation, and shared experience, capable of sustaining men in both the visible demands of military life and the invisible currents of social, psychological, and environmental complexity. Each day, with its marches, drills, labor, observation, and quiet moments of reflection became part of an ongoing narrative of adaptation, endurance, and subtle mastery, embedding knowledge, resilience, and skill into the soldiers' lives, shaping not just the body but perception, judgment, and the continuous story of what it meant to exist and endure as a soldier in the vast Roman Empire. Another morning unfolded across the camp, the sunlight creeping slowly over tents, polished armor, and neatly arranged shields, casting long shadows and illuminating the familiar landscape of disciplined order. Soldiers rose with practiced efficiency, stretching stiff limbs, adjusting belts and straps, and checking the fit of larica segmenata and gladii, each motion part of a ritual that reinforced readiness and instilled a quiet sense of purpose. The aroma of morning fires mingled with the scent of damp earth and the slightly sweet, hearty smell of porridge, coarse bread, and occasional dried fruit or cheese, a breakfast both functional and grounding, preparing bodies for the repeated exertions of the day ahead. Water, carefully rationed and sometimes diluted with wine, refreshed the men while offering a small indulgence, a reminder that even in strict routines, comfort could be found in modest ways. Soldiers moved into drills with fluid precision, the sound of boots on earth, shields clashing, and wooden swords striking forming a percussive rhythm that reinforced discipline, coordination, and shared awareness. Marches over uneven terrain challenged balance and endurance, formation drills honed silent communication and anticipation, and mock combat sharpened reflexes, timing, and trust in comrades, blending physical exertion with mental acuity. Between these formal exercises, soldiers attended to camp maintenance and personal gear. Tents were repaired from wind or rain damage, barricades reinforced, weapons sharpened, and leather oiled, each task both necessary and subtly meditative, teaching patience, attention, and mastery over the environment. Conversation intertwined seamlessly with labor, shifting from tactical analysis to storytelling, rumors of distant provinces, and reflections on family and home. Letters, when received, were treasured, providing emotional sustenance and a tenuous connection to life beyond the regimented world of the Legion. Afternoon drills grew longer and more demanding, incorporating obstacle navigation, extended marches, and complex tactical simulations designed to sharpen endurance, awareness, and adaptability. Soldiers became attuned to subtle environmental cues, the rustle of leaves indicating wildlife, the shift in terrain suggesting hidden obstacles, or distant sounds hinting at movement beyond the camp. This constant observation cultivated heightened perception and informed decision-making, a skill as vital as physical prowess. Informal contests and playful rivalries punctuated the day, testing accuracy with javelins, timing in drills, or coordination during maneuvers. These interactions reinforced camaraderie, skill, and subtle leadership abilities, blending practical training with moments of relief and social cohesion. As daylight waned, the camp transitioned into a quieter rhythm. Fires illuminated the perimeter, watch rotations were established, and final inspections ensured that weapons, armor, and fortifications were ready for night. Soldiers reflected on the day's exertions, observed nature around them, the gentle flow of a river, the whisper of nocturnal animals, or the faint rustling of wind through the trees, and shared quiet stories or laughter, reinforcing trust and interpersonal bonds. Sleep came in intervals, interrupted by duty or alerts, yet remained essential for recovery, clarity, and readiness for the unexpected challenges of military life. Within this disciplined cycle, subtle pleasures and moments of satisfaction emerged, the perfect alignment of a shield in formation, sunlight glinting off polished metal, a bird's flight catching attention, or a shared laugh with a comrade. These fleeting instances reinforced presence, awareness, and human connection, demonstrating that even under strict discipline, small joys persisted. The cumulative effect of repeated drills, observation, and reflection shaped resilience, perceptiveness, and nuanced understanding. Soldiers internalized lessons of survival, social dynamics, and environmental awareness, blending individual initiative with collective cohesion. Life in the Legion balanced structured routine with subtle discovery, monotony with insight, exertion with reflection. The Legion functioned as more than a fighting unit. It became a living system of coordination, trust, observation, and shared experience, sustaining men through both the visible and unseen demands of military existence. Each day, through marching, drilling, labor, observation, and quiet contemplation, contributed to an ongoing narrative of adaptation, endurance, and subtle mastery, embedding skill, resilience, and understanding into the soldiers' lives, shaping both body and mind, and telling the continuous story of what it meant to live, endure, and adapt as a soldier within the vast Roman Empire, step by step, breath by breath, and moment by moment. The day began quietly, the first light brushing over tents, polished shields, and rows of carefully arranged weapons, illuminating a camp alive with disciplined motion. Soldiers stirred with habitual precision, stretching stiff limbs, adjusting armor and belts, checking gladii, and performing small rituals of readiness that had become second nature. The mingling aromas of damp earth, morning fires, and thick porridge filled the air, signaling sustenance, warmth, and the rhythm of another day. Breakfast was straightforward yet essential: coarse bread, porridge, occasional dried fruit or cheese, and water, sometimes blended with wine, offered both nourishment and subtle comfort, grounding men in the cycles of daily life. Drills began almost immediately, boots striking earth in cadenced harmony, shields colliding, and wooden swords tapping in a rhythm that reinforced coordination, focus, and mutual awareness. Marches over uneven terrain tested endurance and balance, formation drills cultivated silent communication and trust, and mock combat honed reflexes, timing, and anticipation, embedding lessons of both survival and camaraderie. Beyond formal exercises, soldiers attended to the maintenance of camp and equipment. Tents were mended, barricades reinforced, weapons sharpened, and leather oiled, each action a deliberate measure of preparation and attention to detail, a practice of patience and subtle mastery over both tools and environment. Conversation flowed alongside labor, shifting effortlessly from tactical discussion to storytelling, rumors of faraway provinces, and reflections on distant homes and family. Letters, when they arrived, were treasured, offering emotional sustenance and a fragile tether to life beyond the regimented confines of military life. Afternoon exercises extended physical and mental boundaries. Long marches, obstacle navigation, and intricate tactical simulations cultivated stamina, awareness, and adaptability. Soldiers honed their observation skills, noting subtle cues in terrain, the rustle of leaves signaling wildlife, or distant sounds hinting at approaching forces. Awareness became instinctive, informing movement, decision-making, and coordination, and integrating perception seamlessly into daily tasks. Informal contests and playful rivalries emerged naturally, testing accuracy with javelins, timing during drills, and coordination in maneuvers, blending practical skill with humor, camaraderie, and subtle leadership practice. Evening brought a slower, reflective rhythm to the camp. Fires lined the perimeter, watch rotations were assigned, and final inspections of weapons, armor, and fortifications ensured preparedness for night. Soldiers engaged in quiet reflection, observing the subtle movements of nature, the flicker of water in a stream, nocturnal animals stirring, or wind whispering through leaves, and shared stories, jokes, or laughter, reinforcing bonds and trust. Sleep arrived in fragmented intervals, interrupted by duty, vigilance, or unexpected events, yet remained essential for physical restoration, mental clarity, and readiness for unforeseen challenges. Within this disciplined flow, subtle pleasures and satisfaction emerged. The alignment of shields in formation, sunlight glinting off polished armor, the brief flight of a bird, or the fleeting, unguarded laughter of a comrade. These small moments reinforced presence, awareness, and human connection, reminding men that even under strict routine, fleeting joys and meaningful experiences persisted. The repetition of drills, observation, maintenance, and reflection cultivated resilience, perceptiveness, and nuanced understanding. Soldiers internalized lessons not only of survival but of social dynamics, environmental awareness, and the delicate interplay between individual initiative and collective cohesion. Life in the Legion existed as a balance between structure and adaptability, monotony and insight, exertion and reflection. The Legion functioned as more than a military force. It was a living, dynamic system of coordination, trust, perception, and shared experience, capable of sustaining men through both immediate and subtle challenges of daily life. Every march, drill, laborious task, observation, and reflective moment contributed to an ongoing narrative of endurance, skill, and subtle mastery, weaving together knowledge, resilience, and perception into the very fabric of a soldier's existence. In this continuous flow, the legionary learned that survival, adaptation, and presence were inseparable, forming a story told not in words alone but in each deliberate step, measured strike, and quiet observation, revealing what it truly meant to endure, live, and navigate the complex currents of life in the Roman Empire. The camp stirred again as dawn spread its soft light across tents, fortifications, and rows of carefully arranged weapons, casting a calm glow over the disciplined activity that defined life within the legion. Soldiers rose with the practiced movements of men whose bodies remembered every action, stretching stiff limbs, adjusting straps and armor, checking gladii, and performing small rituals that ensured readiness and a quiet sense of control. The air carried the familiar mix of damp earth, smoke from morning fires, and the hearty aroma of thick porridge, coarse bread, and occasional dried fruit or cheese. Breakfast was functional yet grounding, preparing both body and mind for the exertions that awaited. Water, sometimes mixed with wine, refreshed and subtly comforted, a minor indulgence that maintained morale amid relentless routines. Drills began immediately, the rhythmic sounds of boots on soil, shields colliding, and wooden swords tapping forming a hypnotic pattern that reinforced discipline, focus, and collective awareness. Marching across uneven terrain tested endurance, balance, and coordination, while formation drills strengthened silent communication and trust. Mock combat honed reflexes, timing, and anticipation, merging physical skill with mental agility. Beyond drills, soldiers attended to essential maintenance, tents repaired from wind or rain damage, barricades reinforced, weapons sharpened, and leather oiled. Each task, though repetitive, cultivated patience, precision, and mastery, instilling a sense of agency over both the environment and equipment. Conversation moved fluidly alongside labor, shifting from tactical reflection to storytelling, rumors of far-off provinces, and memories of distant homes. Letters, when delivered, became treasured tokens of connection, emotionally sustaining soldiers and reminding them of lives paused but not forgotten. Afternoon exercises extended both endurance and perceptiveness. Long marches, obstacle navigation, and complex tactical simulations cultivated stamina, situational awareness, and adaptability. Soldiers learned to read the environment subtly, the flight of a bird, the rustle of leaves, distant animal movements, all informing judgment and decision-making, weaving observations seamlessly into action. Informal contests and friendly rivalries surfaced naturally, testing accuracy with javelins, speed in drills, and coordination during maneuvers, blending skill, camaraderie, and humor in ways that reinforced both social bonds and practical ability. As the day faded, the camp's rhythm shifted toward reflection and quiet vigilance. Fires were lit along the perimeter, watch rotations organized, and final inspections ensured readiness for night. Soldiers observed the surrounding environment, the glimmer of a distant stream, nocturnal creatures stirring, the whisper of wind through foliage, and shared quiet stories, laughter, or observations, reinforcing social cohesion and trust. Sleep arrived in intermittent cycles, interrupted by duty, vigilance, or unexpected events, yet it remained vital for restoration, clarity, and preparation for the unknown. Within this repetitive yet purposeful structure, subtle pleasures emerged. The alignment of shields, sunlight glinting on polished metal, the brief song of a bird, or shared laughter with a comrade, reminding men that even under strict discipline, moments of connection and joy endured. The cumulative effect of drills, observation, maintenance, and reflection shaped resilience, perception, and nuanced understanding, embedding lessons in survival, social dynamics, and environmental awareness. Soldiers internalized not only tactical and physical skills but also subtle insights into coordination, trust, and collective cohesion. Life in the Legion balanced rigorous routine with adaptability, monotony with discovery, exertion with reflection, forming a continuous narrative of endurance, skill, and subtle mastery. The Legion itself operated as a living, dynamic system, a network of coordination, trust, observation, and shared experience, capable of sustaining men through both immediate and unseen challenges. Each day's march, drill, labor, observation, and quiet reflection contributed to an ongoing story of adaptation, resilience, and skill, weaving knowledge, awareness, and mastery into the fabric of a soldier's existence. In this ever-flowing rhythm, the legionary came to understand that survival, presence, and adaptation were inseparable, forming a story told not only in action but in each deliberate step, measured strike, and careful observation, revealing what it truly meant to endure, live, and navigate the complex realities of life in the Roman Empire.